welcome to this episode of 20 Minute Tims. I'm your host Jamie. This week I'm joined by Melly.
Yes.
And Stephen.
What's happening?
Not an awful lot, mate. Patreon.com/20 Minute Tims. If you like this podcast, you want to support us, there's two things we need you to do. One, if you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe. Costs you nothing, no hassle, but it helps us enormously if you are subscribed. And more than half the people that watch this every week are actually not subscribed, so just hit that subscribe button. And if you want to support the podcast, you want extra podcast videos and writing from us, patreon.com/20 Minute Tims. Martin Melly famously, one of the things we did on Patreon, live reaction to any breaking news, and approximately 100 games ago we had live reaction to the announcement of Ange Postecoglou. He had his 100th game against Hearts midweek. Many inane questions from the press corps that I'm sure we'll come to on it, trying to nail him down to whether or not he's moving to the Spurs job, which last time I checked wasn't available.
No.
Asking him if he's going to be here for another 100 games. How he can possibly tell you that, I'll never know. But I suppose now is maybe a good time to revisit our initial thoughts on when Ange landed.
Yeah, it seems like a long time ago now.
Seems like a lot longer than 100 games, given how many we play every season.
Yeah, and I think the panic set in when we realised that Eddie Howe wasn't coming. Who are we going to get? Ange Postecoglou's name was put out there. I'm like, right, who is this guy? A bit sceptical at first, but once you looked into it, I thought, you know what, this could be something good. But there was a lot of buts in there. Didn't quite think it would be this good. We looked into it, we found out a bit more about the man. Everybody said he would be special. Did not expect him to be this special, to be honest.
I don't remember. The only thing I do remember from our reaction to Postecoglou, even before he was announced as the manager.
What Jamie said.
What did I say? Well, let's Stephen finish.
The only thing I remember about that period is when Eddie Howe was, I think, Jamie, did you and I react live to the Eddie Howe has been cancelled thing? Because remember, Celtic made the statement that Eddie Howe was really weird for a club to announce that someone's not going to be the new manager, but that's what happened. We went live and we were talking, and as it happened, so live during our broadcast, you said that a number of names had been linked with the replacement's the wrong word, but to step in instead of Eddie Howe, and you listed a couple, and Ange Postecoglou was in there, and I was like, who is that? I've never once heard of that guy, and shows what I knew at the time, quite literally nothing, and that's what prompted that type of reaction at the time. But I think after that point I was fairly open to it, because at that point, it's up to you. It's up to the individual to go away and find out more about the guy. If you just sit there and say, "No, I've never heard of this guy," doesn't know the league, doesn't know the city, doesn't know British football and all that sort of stuff, that's kind of on you. But I remember thinking initially, I've never heard of this guy. I'm seriously worried about this, because it was Eddie Howe fever for months, for weeks and months at a time. It was all about Eddie Howe. We don't have a plan B here, so it better be Eddie Howe. But I remember after my initial, definite doubts about it, I thought, right, I kind of like the sound of this guy the more I read into it.
Never heard of him, don't want him.
Was that what I said?
That's fair enough, because I think a lot of us...
For clarity, that was almost immediate, like the first 2 minutes of and not a lot of people had heard of Ange Postecoglou.
No, I can't sit here and claim I had, but once you looked into it, the Australian manager from the World Cup, and all that, right, okay, but you had to really calm yourself, because it wasn't just we needed a new manager, we needed a full new team as well.
Crisis,
we were 21 points behind in the league. It was woeful, and we all got on board. Like, I think most people would, and thought, you know what, this could be good, but the board have got to back him, because we're still in the limbo about the board as well. Dominic Mackay was coming in, and that seems like a long time ago. So for him to come in and completely transform this club into something like I never thought it could be, a club that goes out and buys players before they have to, replaces players before they've left, has two decent players for each position in a short space of time. He's only had 4 transfer windows, and this club is unrecognisable from the one he took over. So some of the guys that played in the first games, for him to manage to stay in that league, lose the first 3 games and turn that round into last season being up there in probably my top 3 of Celtic seasons ever, and this season going to be up there as well if we continue on this way.
I think, Stephen, it's fair to say that Ange Postecoglou coming to Scottish football was a bit of a masterstroke. And looking back, the Eddie Howe thing left, and I can't imagine a more perfect manager for Celtic than Ange Postecoglou was last season for these past 100 games. He's got exactly not just the managerial ability and the managerial skill, but he's got the right temperament about him.
Yeah,
for exactly what we needed.
Well, I've come to believe since the cup final, the recent cup final win over Rangers, during which or after which I get a little bit emotionally carried away, as you can be able to tell from our At the Match podcast recorded yards from Hampden Park. Since then, and how much I enjoyed that day and watching him, as we've spoken about before, punching the chest and like punching the air and all that. Since then, I've come to think that Ange Postecoglou is, to all intents and purposes, essentially irreplaceable as Celtic manager now. Yeah. Because I firmly believe that if Celtic do their job, do well as a club, and do their due diligence and all that, you could go out and get a European or otherwise coach who could come in and still continue the winning formula, the winning philosophy of a club like Celtic. That is entirely possible. But to marry that with the cult of personality, the personality that we've all managed or hugely bought into over the last 100 games or so, I think you'd be very, very lucky to catch lightning in a bottle twice in that regard. I'm not saying like once Ange goes, and I hope he never does, then it's all over. We can just forget it, because things move on, and we might well be able to replace that. But I really doubt we'll be able to tick all these boxes ever again.
What do you think the reason for that is, that we've all sort of latched onto Ange? I've got my own thoughts about it. And I think I've sort of made this point before, but I think there's something about Ange that's like the old school Scottish/British manager. But Ange, there's a bit of the Fergie about Ange.
Right,
There's the no nonsense, the work ethic, the way he carries himself. There's a bit of that magic about Ange, isn't there? There is a cult of personality about him. I mean, I think obviously you don't know an awful lot about Ange. He keeps his cards quite close to his chest a lot of the time. And I'm sure if he was watching this, he'd be like, what the fuck are you sitting discussing my personality for? I'm a football manager, mate. And he would hate that, which is in itself quite an endearing quality. He's not here for the fluff, he's not here for the nonsense, he's here to build a winning football team, and that's exactly what he's done.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when they come to Celtic or Rangers, it's this job's too big for them, and I kind of agree with that sometimes, because Ange has again changed the way I think about football. But I've said it before, it changes the way I think about life a lot of the time with what he says. He's like, you need to go out there and go up again. If somebody gets injured, well, somebody else comes in. It's not a big worry for him. He takes it all in his stride, and it's what Stephen said last season. We don't need somebody to come in and know the city and have to win every game, because that was going to be impossible where Celtic were. And I think what I like about him is the honesty, and just the fact that it feels like it's a supporter up there who knows what he's doing, and he knows the gravity of where he is right now in his career. He has come up the hard way, he's taken risks in his life, and he's got the rewards. And I think with Michael Beale, you see how insecure the guy is. I think he's trying to convince himself that he's a good manager and not other people, and he gets lost in that. Ange Postecoglou is so secure in who he is. He knows, he's so assured about himself, he knows what he's doing, he knows what he wants, and he's going and doing it. Other people out there don't have a clue. He's got a style of play, he's got a way of thinking, and he sticks to his principles and beliefs, and he gives you honesty as well. He tells you, like, I'm a football manager, that's what I do. He's calm about it, but he also knows what it's like to be a supporter, because the thing is, the fact that he used to get up with his dad and all that and watch football means that he knows what it's like to be on the outside, having to be a football fan in somewhere where it's not the main thing. And now he's at Celtic, where football is the main thing, but Celtic aren't a massive club within football anymore. So I think he just, for want of a better phrase, gets it.
Yeah. He gets it. He knows the city.
And he speaks so well as well. Yeah. He speaks so well. He's very honest. And with you, what you've just said there about him being entirely secure in who he is, he also knows he's been around the block a good bit. He's been all over the world now, Europe. He's managed in a number of continents at international level as well. He knows that he's never all that far away from this going completely wrong as well. Yeah. I don't think that'll happen for him at Celtic, but he knows as a manager that nothing's ever safe. Yeah, that's why he doesn't really talk about his future, because he simply doesn't know. You got the idea that Brendan Rodgers always wanted to go back to England, and that's fair enough. That's not a criticism, but you got the impression that we were kind of lucky to have Brendan Rodgers in his eyes, and he was always with one eye on going back to England again, which is fair enough. But you don't get that impression with Ange. What I get from Ange is that he doesn't know what could happen next. He basically, he could, something could go wrong for him. He could end up in Italy, whatever. He doesn't really have a path. He seems to get quite
annoyed, doesn't he, when people link him to these jobs? When the Tottenham question came up, I thought that was ridiculous. Yeah. And they were like, what do you take from being linked to jobs like that? And that to me is such a stupid question, because you're saying, hey, I've made up this thing about you. What do you think about it? and you're like, well, right, if you get any other hypotheticals you want to ask me about,
that's our job.
Yeah. And I really, really struggled to understand that thought process. And I think, like, Ange will have his ambitions, but I think Melly's right when he says, well, one, I've been on the record saying I think Ange's got work to do here at Celtic. I don't think Ange's going to be super happy. I don't think Ange's anywhere near, right, that's my job done. At Celtic, nowhere near it. I think this is Ange's first proper season as Celtic manager. There's a big job to do last year. He probably didn't want to be firefighting the way he was firefighting last year. I think he wants a decent crack at European football at Celtic. I think there's still boxes to tick for Ange before he probably wants to go down the road. But I don't think I'm naive in thinking that the guy's got ambitions. I mean, he's getting on a bit in his career as well.
Yeah, it's something I've thought about before, and that I don't really see an awful lot of English teams now appointing managers over 60. There will be the odd example here and there, but Ange's kind of getting to that age where he might start to think about it. But the fact it feeds back into what we're saying here is that you never know, and Ange's more than aware of that. Other examples you could probably use are like Brendan Rodgers as well. Probably always fancied going back to England. I also get the impression that Neil Lennon thought he was always going to be a Celtic manager. He just, if I suppose, is the rest of his career probably illustrates that as well. He's never really managed to get to stick anywhere else. Neil Lennon is a guy who's probably a Celtic manager and probably very, very little else. So I don't mean that as a criticism either. It's just the kind of it's just the kind of vibe he gives off. I get the feeling that he had that break in between Celtic jobs. It was like he was always destined to come back at some point. Maybe still is.
But I think,
Stephen,
come on. Do you think there's like a sort of patronising element of going, are we falling into that trap where we are going, well, not us personally, because I don't necessarily buy into it, but people like, okay, so the pinnacle of your career, Ange, is moving to England. Ange could go, hold on, the pinnacle of my career was taking Australia, the winning the Asia Cup with Australia. I've already reached the pinnacle of my career. Like, there's nothing England can offer me that I haven't already achieved. There's no boxes that England can offer me. I might get a crack at it, but if it doesn't go well, or if I don't get that crack, I've done plenty in the game.
The one thing I would say on that is that it was something England can offer, and we've spoken about this before as well, but there's something England can offer that very few places can, is the chance to pit his wits against the best coaches in the world. I don't know if that necessarily counts as Australia manager. Yes, you do get high level managers at international level, but I think that's the one thing above all others. Yeah, there's money and all that, and you get to manage like sort of big clubs to an extent in England, but that's the one thing I think he'll want to do.
Stephen took the words right out my gub there. I was going to say that. I think it is the coaches' league now, no matter what you think about it. Wolves have got Lopetegui as their manager. There's teams down the bottom that have very good managers, and to go, if you are an ambitious guy like we think Ange is, I think you want to be like, how am I going to go up against these guys? Right? Yes, I can do it 6 games in the Champions League, but to do it over 38 games in England, pit your wits against the very best in coaches to see how you get on. Look, he might get there, he might not. I don't think he's going to be one of these guys that is like Brendan Rodgers, where his laser focus is getting back there and having to do it. I think he'll take it as it comes, but I think if the chance comes, he would seriously consider it. But I just don't see it being too soon.
I don't doubt that, but I do take issues with this. What can he do 6 games in the Champions League? Because that's not quite accurate, because if you make a mark in the Champions League as Celtic manager, whatever that might be, Rangers, as much as we hate discussing them on this podcast, Rangers reached the European final. If Ange did that with Celtic, that would... Realistically, the best thing Ange can do for his career potentially is get to the Europa League final or win the Europa League with Celtic. Because
didn't do much for Giovanni Van Bronckhorst, did it?
Well, it didn't do well. There's reasons for that. Do you know what I mean? He was absolutely horrible domestically and an embarrassment, and the Rangers fans didn't like him. They all fell out with him, and he didn't get it, even though he was an ex-Rangers player. No various reasons, but I think it's if you're saying, well, what can Ange do in his career? He can make a mark with Celtic in Europe, and that to me is bigger and more important and more impressive than going and getting a job in England and pitting your wits against, this is just my opinion, obviously it might not be his, but pitting your wits against, because if he gets a Southampton or a Brighton or an Everton and he gets battered out every single week and he ends up finishing, bottom half of I think doing something in Europe with Celtic is a big thing, and saying it's just 6 games in the Champions League, that whilst that's strictly true, I think it diminishes what that is a wee bit, because people in the Champions League don't go, well, big deal, they only won 18 games, whatever it was. There's more to it than that.
I didn't mean it like that. I mean, like, he's got 6 games going up against top opposition, whereas down in England every week you're going up against top opposition, and in the Champions League
that's only fun if you can do something. I know the same is true for Celtic in the Champions League, but I don't think Frank Lampard was having much fun as Everton
Frank
manager.
Lampard might be a bad example, but when you look at Graham Potter doing very well with Brighton, De Zerbi as well following on from him, and then you've got other
Graham Potter does look like a broken man now, though.
Yeah, but he's done a very good job, and I don't see a lot of people doing very well at Chelsea right now because of the circumstances there. But there's guys that have come into Midland teams like Thomas Frank at Brentford as well, and made them a stable Premier League team that are pushing for Europe. Marco Silva at Fulham come up and they're challenging in the top half. So I don't think Ange will look at these guys and go, I'm a million miles off them. I think if he can go into a team that has a decent standard and build on it, I think he could be a decent manager. But I just
feel the need to fight Celtic's corner a wee bit here, because I think you fall in that trap of going, as much as we are realistic about the draw of England, there's so much. There's so many more chapters Ange could write as Celtic manager here that would bring massive success and massive reputation. This is a huge club with huge potential, and I think, sometimes we as fans, we just think, we're going to go into the Champions League and we're not really going to do anything. But as much as I hate to say it, and as much as they might have got some good results along the way, there's a lot of bandwidth there. There's a lot you can achieve as Celtic manager. He's not really come close to doing it all, is what I'm saying. I think he'll think that as well.
No, I think so as well. I think it's either going to be a job will come up and he'll take it, or he could be here for 5 to 7 seasons, because he's going about it the right way, because I keep speaking about it, but you need to keep refreshing in Scottish football. I don't mean the manager, but definitely in the players, because I think that fire goes out playing Ross County 4 times a season, and you need to regenerate every 2 seasons, maybe keep changing it about. And a guy like him as well that doesn't get close to the players and keeps changing the players, it doesn't mean the message gets lost. We've had Celtic teams in the past, like Martin O'Neill's team, from his 2nd season to the end of his 5th season, it was pretty much the same players, wasn't it? Whereas with Ange, I don't get the case that's going to happen. So I know Martin O'Neill was a long time ago, but I think he's going to keep building and want to get something, because I think he has got a long-term plan. I don't think he's looking beyond Celtic. That will come because his long-term plan's going well.
I think in terms of European success at Celtic, I suppose we would need to sort of define what that exactly looks like, because yes, Rangers got to a Europa League final, and I'm not going down the route of just saying it was all jammy, right? That's ridiculous. You don't get all the way to a final by pure luck. You have to get the results, but a lot did go their way at the time, right? And that's not me being bitter. You think back to they played Borussia Dortmund without Haaland and all that, right? So the reason I'm saying that is because it's not just a case of being a really good coach and dragging your team to the final. Sometimes things have to go your way. And if we got to, for example, a quarter final in Europe, that's not as good as a final, but people would probably still moan about getting to that. Doing well in Europa League is, by definition alone, a failure at the Champions League. So if by some fairly decent achievement we get out of a Champions League group, that's probably the best we can possibly hope for.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah,
given the resources and all that sort of stuff we'll be up against.
It's very good. It's definitely an achievement, but I can assure you people would still be disappointed. See, if we draw Bayern Munich in the last 16, people would still be disappointed if we beat them. That's the nature of a high pressure environment and a club like Celtic and all that. So I don't know if we can expect them to get to a final that has been a very recent benchmark.
I don't expect
set.
them, but what I'm saying is, it's not the question.
No,
It's
of course
not out of
Yeah,
the question. These things are within the ability of the manager. I suppose what I'm doing here is I'm appealing to Ange because we know he watches. I'm saying, look, if there's a wobble and you think maybe you want to go down to England, you want to go to the coaches, just remember there's you can be immortal at Celtic. There's if what you're chasing is football fanaticism and history and being an iconic manager and being a big name and being adored and all the stuff that comes with football, not the pure maths of the English Premier League and being a small club manager in a big league. If what you're chasing is the drama and the dream of football, you can achieve that at Celtic.
Yeah, you can. I'm reluctant to do that to individuals when it comes to like you have to do this or you're to be immortal and all that, because we did all that with Kieran Tierney and all these guys. It's never enough. Basically, there's never a good time for people to leave the club and have everyone satisfied about it. People say, if he'd stayed for the 10, he would have been a club legend. It's never enough, because after that comes something else. So I'm reluctant to sort of project that.
I know for some people.
But
for sensible people, it's enough. For sensible, there are people out there who would sensibly look at, say, Ange made some mark. I know there would be people, because it's the internet, there would be people saying, oh well, it was only Europa League. Do you know what I mean? If he didn't sub such and such, we probably would have beaten that team in the Champions League. And and look at the draw we ended up getting. I know that all these arguments continue, but I think
it's hilarious we still do that to the Europa League, isn't it? Despite the fact it's a massive club that wins it almost
every
year.
Doing like cartwheels about winning it.
Massive clubs win it every single year, and we've still got guys like Hugh Keevins calling it the Diddy Cup and the Consolation Cup and all that.
That's basically how Scotland treats football a lot of the time. Like outside the four walls of the studio, a lot of the time, the more professional outfits and the guys who are paid to do this for a living, I think they showed themselves up big time when Ange came in. I think these guys showed themselves up, and the phrase that sort of has stuck with me and a few people have repeated back to me after the podcast was, they treat Australia like it's the backwater when we're the Scottish football when Scottish football's the backwater.
Mitchell and Webb meme, are we the backwater?
Are we the backwater? And okay, so if you're calling England the Coaches League, what's Scotland? Because we've got Robbie Nielsen twice in a week. It's coach extraordinaire.
What a fantastic segue that was.
I was waiting for. Well, what I was doing was waiting for one of you to say the word Coaches League again, and I say talking about Coaches League. We've got Robbie Nielsen, what Moldy one.
Martindale.
Yeah, well, it's coaches in this league. Boy, have we got coaches.
Parks. That was an obvious joke there. Yeah, Parks of Hamilton.
Parks, there you go. What? Oh my God. What game do you want to talk about first? The cup game or the league game?
Which beating of hearts would I like to talk about first? Both, please.
Oh, let's talk it.
Both thoroughly. The one we scored 3 in, both of them. Lovely stuff this week from Sarah. I think the cup game was more satisfying just because it was at Tynecastle, and as soon as we got that early goal, you're like, this is going to be a good day, lads. This is going to be very enjoyable as well because I was on the way to the game. I drove, me and my pal Gary drove, so had to walk through Hearts fans to get to the game, and there was these wee guys get into these Fenian and that, and like just wee guys, just so clouded in hate, they didn't have a clue what they were saying. And then when you're in the stadium and you see them, every time the ball goes out for a shire, they're over at somebody or giving Joe Hart, and you're like, you just don't even know what he's hate, do you? Not so confused and just boiling
just
over.
Confused, angry wee guys that are furious at everything.
It's okay. You just want to take him aside, it's okay. Everything's going to be fine.
They can't decide if they want to be hipsters or if they want to be mad Brits that support it. They just can't decide. Torn.
Well done, lads. You had a line, you're going mental. Absolute chaos.
Wow.
So I was just really happy to beat them as well and get that early goal, so they had absolutely nothing to hang on to. Then the goal right before half time just absolutely killed them stone dead, and just the bitterness commenced. But it was great to see Celtic.
I don't want to blow
my own
trumpet here, Stephen, but knowing Robbie Nielsen's tactical nous as I do, I sort of suspected that after his comments of the midweek game about how, and Andy Halliday, part-time footballer, full-time podcaster, full-time Rangers fan, full-time podcaster, part-time Hearts player, very part-time Hearts player by the look of his appearances this season, saying that the cup game was the one they really wanted to win. We did the live build-up, and that's something we do on Patreon. If you want to go all in on patreon.com/20minutetims, live build-up to every away game, so you don't have to tolerate Chris Boyd and all the rest of it. You can come and watch us. We bring you build-up right to kick off. And I thought that game would be a formality. I actually did say the tie would be over by half an hour, but it was over by half time.
Yeah, a couple of minutes in, wasn't it? The Moy goal, a great finish. Yeah, I'm really impressed with it though, because Hearts.
What with my prediction?
Yeah.
Thank you.
With the double header, the ease of the double header, because Hearts are the third best team in the league. And if I'm totally honest, they're absolutely no match for Celtic, as was proven over the course of both games. But they tried to play a little bit of football, which is rare.
Can I correct you there? Because Robbie Nielsen said after the home game, the league game, that is the best any away team has played at Celtic Park, probably he's seen.
Quite literally self-proclaimed.
Yes, that's what he said. He goes, I think that's the best he goes, some teams come here and park the bus, but we were passing through them, knocking it about lovely. That's the best I've seen an away team play here in a very long time. He may have said a decade. I don't know I don't know if that's an addendum on my part.
More meaningful when someone else is the judge of that, Ren. If someone else that was to say Robbie Nielsen, that was the best performance I've seen. But
he could have lied, couldn't he? He goes, somebody actually just said to me that, but he didn't. But Robbie Nielsen loves talking up his own team.
Oh yeah, and he's the biggest whinge in Scottish football. I was going to say an under the radar, underrated whinge, but he's not. He's number one, isn't he? Absolutely.
Well, what did he say after you need a decapitation to get a red card at Celtic Park? Unbelievable, man.
Yeah. I think we've had a couple of red cards at the Celtic Park this season.
It was referring to the Bernabei tackle, which wasn't even close to what you would consider a red card tackle.
Well, on that, before we move on to anything else, no, I don't think that was a red card either. And look, we're fairly balanced in here. I like to think people would probably agree with that. When we're asked about penalties, we're fairly honest. We don't just sort of stick the green tinted specs on. I watched that challenge and thought it was a solid yellow card. I think that you have to...
Not even an orange?
No, an orange card. You have to leave space in football for bad tackles to exist. You can't just be solid, clean tackle and straight red card and there's nothing in between. I think Bernabei just mistimed it, planted his foot on the ankle, but there was no momentum.
He was kind of falling away, wasn't he?
Bernabei did it from a sort of standing, falling position. He didn't come in and he just stuck his foot out and managed to and just sort of scraped the guy's shin. It was a bad tackle. But those have to exist. It can't just be straight red cards for absolutely everything, in my opinion, or it's chaos.
Since we've kind of drifted on to the subject of Bernabei, we saw a couple of rotated sides against Hearts in both ties. Ange sort of, well, I don't know if he prioritised one over the other. I don't think he would ever say that. We're doing a lot of hypothesising about Ange at the moment on this podcast, but I don't think he would say one was stronger than the other, because I think you're basically thrown out there to fight for your place. But one big change was the fullbacks, Bernabei and Ralston. I've got to say, I thought Anthony Ralston had a poor game midweek. He looked like a guy who'd maybe spent a wee bit too much time out the side. He continually took the ball for the centre halves, pressed forward a couple of paces, did that thing where he's doing that, where he thinks there's nobody to pass to, and then he would return the ball to the centre half, despite the fact Aaron Moy and Matt O'Reilly and Cal McGregor, despite the fact the midfielders were shown for it. So I thought maybe he just lacked a bit of confidence in his own ability to play the pass. On the other side, I thought Bernabei had a pretty poor first half because he was maybe too confident in his own ability to play the pass. So, you could pick, do you want the guy who was not confident enough and not making the passes and causing a bit of frustration throughout the side? And also I think Ralston was at fault for the Hearts goal, and Cameron Carter-Vickers certainly thought so because he bollocked him after it. Or do you want the guy who kept playing passes and kept misplacing them?
I think the fullbacks did make a massive difference in the game, and look, Celtic got the victory, but just when you see on Saturday that the usual fullbacks come in and Celtic are much more assured. Alistair Johnson had a great game on Saturday. Despite Halliday's attentions.
We're going to get to him, man.
Don't worry about that. I think Ralston...
podcast beef. This is going to be like Big A and Tupac or something. That's an open goal. Somebody get clapped outside Co-op in Broomhill. A drive, mate.
Egged outside the Co-op by Slary. I think Ralston was at fault for
drive-by fruiting to quote Mrs. Doubtfire.
1993's Mrs. Doubtfire. Well, it might even been earlier than that.
Sorry.
I think Ralston was at fault for their goal, but I had a hand in Celtic's goal. I think it is quite stark the difference you see, because we've seen it recently with Abada, Turnbull, Ralston, Bernabei and now Haksabanovic guys that haven't played for a long time. I think that was Ralston's first start this year. Haven't played for a long time, struggle when they first come into the team. And that's because this team is ferocious, it's relentless. We keep talking about it, but this team's play at such a tempo that it is going to be hard to get up to speed because of the press and because of the way we play. Ralston is a fit guy. I'm guessing Bernabe is as well. So for them to show up, it's just a lack of match sharpness because they're not up to speed with this team. And I think it's been shown with Turnbull coming on, scoring a few goals, getting a start, and then just you look way off it. And that's 4 or 5 players that have come in recently, because Haksabanovic, I was choking from my play at the weekend, he comes in. So I'm not going to be too cruel on these guys that come in. I think it's going to be hard to get up to speed with this Celtic team right now, because we have got a settled team. It was 3 games in 6 days. That's probably not going to happen again this season. I think we might only have one more midweek game. So it's just about getting more game time. But at the same time, we've got players playing ahead of them that are playing too well. So I think the 2 guys sort of settled into the game, but it's going to be very difficult coming in.
Yeah, what I would say in Ralston's, the positive side of the ledger for Ralston is that he was at fault for the goal, because it was passed right across him and you can see the hesitation. Just a split second, he goes for it and then he pulls out and Hearts are on the break. See that inside through ball down the right wing that Ralston plays? He's really excellent at that.
He's disgusted at ABADA at one point.
Took the words right out of my mouth. So that's his level. See if ABADA had a better first touch, Ralston would have sent him through several times. You could have had the sort of secondary assist for Ralston on a couple of occasions. He's very, very good at that. But you're right, he just wasn't particularly sharp. I think he just looked a little bit sluggish. And I think with this team, it's something we've said before about when it comes to Maida and ABADA on the wings. Sometimes the blend just feels slightly off. And Ralston, see when you go into a team with Moy didn't start that game, or did he actually? No, O'Reilly played. So when you've got a couple of players that,
Hattati was on the bench.
It was Moy and O'Reilly, wasn't it? So you've got Moy and O'Reilly and Ralston. And they're all quite slow. They're all quite slow players, and you start to notice it when you
see Moy's slowness, though, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how or what he does, right? Because the ball will be played, and he physically moves after his opponent. Like his opponent's already on the move, and he just goes, "Nah, son, I'll take that. Leave that to Dad, right? Okay." Pop, and he's play. I don't know. I've tried to watch him. I don't know how he does it. It's just are we shifted? Like somebody's already got 2 paces, and he goes, "No, Moy's got this." Right? It's gone.
He's really great at protecting the ball. They're just dropping a shoulder and just moving off players who try and shut him down. He doesn't need the speed. It's really weird. It's like where it would benefit guys like Ralston and O'Reilly and all that, being a bit more athletic in their younger days. Moy just doesn't need it. He seems to have evolved without the need for the need for speed. So that wasn't deliberate there. That was terrible. But Ralston.
What movie's that from? Top Gun.
It's a Top Gun reference.
Top Gun and Mrs. Doubtfire.
I've gone years further back than your Mrs. Doubtfire there, so I've top trumped your movie reference there. Wow. Bernabe, do you know what? I'm going to shock you, because I have been quite harsh on Bernabe this season. I'm not going to get carried away, but I thought he was all right. I did think he was okay.
I'm not going to get carried away.
What I mean by not getting carried away is that I didn't see anything from him in that game that has changed my mind on him one bit. Right? I still have reservations about him. I still like the positive things he does. I think he looks good and direct, aggressive, quite speedy, quite tricky. Gets involved. Was involved in a goal. Like all of that from it, but his ability to play a short passing game, if he doesn't have that, it will undermine all of those positive things. So
he was getting targeted against Hearts as well.
Yeah, a little bit, but
decent in there, but
he and Taylor are deceptively quite good in there. Even if they're not winning everything in there, they tend to do enough to put the guy off. So that if the guy does get a flick on, it tends to go to nobody because they've just sort of desperately flicked it on. So I'm not really concerned about that. I thought Bernabe was all right, definitely better in the second half. I think what I think with these new players is everyone wants to make their mind up, including me. It's part of being a football fan. See, when you get a new player, you want to be able to make your mind up about it, and it's quite frustrating when you can't. So people are sort of naturally leaping to conclusions. Oh, he's no good enough. Oh, he's so talented, he's going to be the next big. So I can't make my mind up about him at all. I think we'll find out a lot about him in season 2, much like we did with Hatate. Because Hatate was in a similar position last season. We could see what Hatate had about him. Clearly a brilliant player, but he was very erratic towards the end of last season.
It's one of these ones with Bernabei where the price tag doesn't help him either, does it? I mean, it was a lot of dough. He came with quite a big reputation. He was a coup for Celtic apparently, and then he's come and he's not really set the header light. And I think as well as that, last season people were kind of in the we need to find better than Greg Taylor boat. Whereas Greg Taylor's performances have went up, so Bernabei's has still got a bit of making up to do there. He had a baby as well, which I saw on Instagram. He posted on Instagram that he had a kid, which might explain the time out the team as well. We were curious about that, and there was no updates there. I did tweet welcome to the world, little Postecoglou Bernabei as a joke, and someone tweeted us, no way that's the baby's name. No shit, that's not the baby's name.
See that? Yeah. Congratulations, little Alexandro, bringing in Postecoglou Bernabei to the world, right?
Postecoglou Francis Bernabei.
Yes, he probably was off to an extent with that, but I think Giacomakis had a baby, or he and his partner had a baby last season, and he was only off for a week, whereas Bernabei hadn't played in 6 weeks. So given that footballers tend to
Bernabei had a DUI as well.
There's
a lot going on.
Yeah, he's been busy. So, given that footballers tend to be in their teens, 20s and 30s, that's kind of the peak time for having kids and all that. Yeah. So if you gave players 6 weeks off every time they had a kid, you get nothing done. So yes, it probably contributed, but I
don't... across all Roy Keane.
So
is he breastfeeding?
It probably contributed, but I doubt you get 6 weeks off for that kind of thing. I think he basically was, from memory... another thing that goes against Bernabei is he hasn't had that run of games, the run of 10, 12 games that people think everyone needs. What I would say about that is he kind of did, because Greg Taylor got injured in January and missed 5 games, but Bernabei didn't play them all. No. He was put in for the first couple and then taken back out again, and he hasn't played since. So I get the impression that Ange is playing it quite cautiously with Bernabei, but I'm parking it until season 2, to be honest.
Spring has sprung and our friends at Manscaped, the leaders in below-the-waist grooming, have the best tools for some spring cleaning in your pants. Trust me, your confidence will be blooming like the flowers. Look your best this spring and join 8 million other men who trust Manscaped. Use code TIMS to get 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com.
The Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer is just a ball sack trimmer that provides their proprietary advanced skin-safe technology. This trimmer is designed to trim hair on loose skin. Although your balls might look like punching bags, don't treat them like one. The Lawnmower 4.0 also waterproof and equipped with an LED light so you can trim in the dark or the shower. Have you ever
needless risk there, I think.
Have you ever met someone who finds nose hairs attractive? The Weed Whacker nose and ear hair trimmer provides proprietary skin-safe technology which helps reduce nicks, snags and tugs in those delicate nose and ear holes.
Save 20% off and free shipping with code TIMS at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping with the code TIMS, TIMS, at manscaped.com. Your balls, thank you. One thing that's particularly pleasing about these results, and particularly pleasing being a Celtic fan over the past couple of years, certainly, that's given us a lot of laughs, is Andy Halliday. He dug out the orange boots for the occasion. I cards on the table, I am quite jealous of Andy Halliday. Right. He has had some really fantastic views of Celtic winning shit, and I've had to watch it for the stand, but that guy's been on the park.
I know, we need to pay for our tickets.
We have to pay for our tickets. Andy gets them for nothing, so we're going to have to start charging him. The guy's an absolute cartoon.
Well, I found it interesting that he gets wheeled out for these games because he barely played. I had to look at the last...
So you're talking about the coaches league? You don't see things like that, you don't see.
I had to look at his Hearts' last half a dozen games or so, and he's been an unused sub in most of them, including against Rangers. So I'd love to know, right, he gets brought in for the 2 Celtic games, starts both games, plays a significant part in both until he was subbed off in one of them. I'd really love to know what the dynamic is on that decision being made. Is it he goes to Robbie Nielsen going, oh gee whiz, Mr. Nielsen, I'm going to try really hard in this one. Please just put me in. Look, I've got a We Are the People tattoo.
Outside the office or whatever the part of this.
I really hate the Tims, so please pitch me in. Or is it the other way around? Is it Robbie Nielsen giving the team talk and he said, lads, we brought in the specialist for this one. And camera cuts to Halliday sitting in the doorway with his arms folded going, just chewing loudly.
Bom,
That's
bom,
right.
bom, bom.
That's right, guys. I'm in for this one, and everyone's like, he's brought in Halliday for this. It's been serious here.
It's Andy Halliday's music.
No, that was the theme tune from Broken Arrow.
Yes, it was. Yes,
or Scream.
Oh yeah, that's right.
1996 and Broken Arrow must have been 98.
Yeah, something like that.
Right, okay.
Hans Zimmer wrote the theme tune to that.
Oh, you know Andy Halliday's theme tune?
All the trivia. So which way around is it? Does he make a pitch to play in these games and in these games only, or is it Robbie Nielsen really needs him for these?
Well, it is Robbie Nielsen falling into that trap of going, I need maximum effort to win this game.
Yeah.
Forgetting that Andy Halliday is really not much of a footballer.
No.
Going to need maximum effort. I think did he not play him in midfield, a central midfield role?
On Saturday played midfield,
Try to do a
left wing
job
back at the midweek game.
Trying to do a job on Callum McGregor, so he obviously wow, what a
Yeah,
mismatch that is. So he's obviously thought that I need a guy with maximum effort. That's why we put Andy Halliday, and he's fallen at that old manager trap.
Just say dig, Jamie.
He needs a man with dig.
Yeah, again, I just don't see it with the guy. He swung in a decent ball for Hearts' goal, but there's nothing there. And look, even if he was decent in his prime, which he was a few years ago, which wasn't great, the Celtics midfield's just too good, man. Moy, McGregor and Hatate are in sensational form now. Thought Matt O'Reilly done well in midfield on Wednesday night as well. So Celtic have got a lot of good options in there that Halliday's never going to be able to keep up with. I think Robbie Nielsen tried something against Celtic and it didn't work, but he did, like the keeper wasn't doing what Rangers doing, just launch up the pitch every time. They tried to play it out, probably because Xander Diamond had done it against him. Xander Clark can't kick the ball very far very well. So
to be fair, when you say they try to play it out, there was one point at the home game where they did that thing, the two centre halves stand on each side, and then they passed it to one, and then they passed it to the other centre half, and then he launched it out the park instead. So they're just sort of taking their turns.
We'll get a wee bit further up.
They're taking their turns to kicking it out of play.
Right, I think they work on so much on stifling Celtic and trying to play out under pressure that they forgot that see if we get the ball out, there's a wee bit you need to do after that to get the ball in the net, because for being so good at Celtic Park, they had 3 shots on target and 2 of them were tricklers to Joe Hart. In the game at the weekend, they had 1 good save out of Joe Hart. So for the third best team,
sensational save out of Joe Hart.
It was unbelievable to really put Celtic under any sustained pressure in either match, despite going 1 goal up. It's pretty damning on the league, and so is the Scottish Cup semi-finals.
You mentioned the Joe Hart thing, and I was going to mention the referees and some aspects of Hearts. There's no Super Mario World this week. We don't really need to dig into that, I don't think. But
a couple of offside goals disallowed that were eventually given.
Yeah, penalty for Andy Halliday's tackle on Alistair Johnston.
I'm going to get to all this, but we're going to get to one of Stephen's pet hates, Melly. So warm up, everyone.
Here we go.
Get ready for a rant.
It shows you how bad this is that I don't know which one of my pet hates this could possibly be. So I'll strap in as well.
So there's a couple. So I got really pissed off with the amount of play acting and time wasting by Hearts at Celtic Park. It was ridiculous. The goalkeeper went down and required treatment twice in the first half, and then just got up and played. Obviously, there was nothing wrong with him.
Somewhere, Martin O'Neill is shuddering after remembering Vitor Baez's performance. Yeah.
So, right, well,
I heard him on a podcast recently, and he was talking about that. He was on Totally Football recently, and he's still talking about how bad Porto's play acting was.
It was absolutely horrendous. So that's where the Hearts got their inspiration for that. But I think one of the most egregious things Stephen was annoyed with, and me as well, is yard stealing at throw-ins. That guy, he stole about 20 yards.
I reckon conservative estimate about 20 yards. It was Michael Smith took a throw in, and what he did, the ball went out, right? The ball went out about the halfway mark of the half. So between the halfway line and the box, it went out about halfway. He picked up and walked all the way to the box and took the throw in. And no one did anything about it, right? To eventually, see when he just about to throw it, Callum McGregor, you can see Callum McGregor in the background putting his arms up like that.
The ref's just watching him do it.
But
happens all the time in Scottish football.
People think this is petty, right? But that you have just walked right up to the box to give yourself the maximum level of danger in getting a long throw in. And seeing an age now where we're drawing lines on the pitch to indicate someone's armpit or a toe and bringing back. Remember during the World Cup, they're bringing that big wall down to see if a toe.
And they're spraying so the players can't steal a yard at free kicks.
So we're down to the square inches on the pitch, and yet you can take a throw in from wherever you want, from wherever you fancy, and no one will do anything about it. It's so incongruous with how the rest of the rules are applied that you can just do whatever you want here.
We need a fifth official up in the stand with a laser pen just pointing to where free kicks and throw-ins.
We just need the referee to do his job. that
laser
would be
pen would be better.
What was it Michael Stewart said about the penalty? Somebody reminded me.
Yeah,
the penalty shout rather.
Yeah, so Alistair Johnson plays the cross, Andy Halliday wipes him out, and Michael Stewart says that it's not a penalty because the tackle didn't affect the cross. That's just fundamentally not how it works at all, because
he barely got a chance to play the cross. I don't think the ball fully left his foot, had it?
No, the two of them were stretching for it. So who's to say that if Halliday wasn't there, he would have just ran onto it and played a better cross, because the cross didn't lead to anything. But again, you're opening yourself up to, so you can just do anything you want as long as it doesn't affect the cross. If the cross has already been played, you can do whatever you want because you can't affect the cross. That's nonsense.
So do you think it was a pen?
Yeah, because it just wiped him out. And what happens if the cross didn't? It went quite high over to the other side of the box. But what if it hadn't? What if it had hit the first defender after Halliday, or hit the post and come back out? Alistair Johnson is now on the deck, having been wiped out. So it's the play doesn't finish there.
I've seen them given against us.
It happened years ago. I think it was a Boxing Day fixture against Aberdeen. Gary did exactly the same thing. I think it might even have been Johnny Hayes actually who played the cross.
Niall McGinn, was it?
Or was it McGinn? It's the other one. So the cross comes in. Emilio Gary wipes the guy out after the cross has been played, and it's given as a penalty, and rightly so.
So one of the things, back onto the football, one of the things that a lot of people wanted to see, yourself, Melly included, and me as well, especially after his goal midweek, was a start for Haksabanovic. Haksabanovic got to play at Tynecastle, and I know Dyson made his injured, so we're probably going to see more of Haksabanovic, but I think that was almost asked and answered for Haksabanovic. Now, under normal circumstances, in normal Celtic teams, that wouldn't be the case, but competition is ferocious here that you can't really afford to come in and just play okay and expect to keep the place, because especially when you're up against Maeda, who is one of Ange's trusted lieutenants on the pitch. He is one of the many players that Ange has. Ange, to me, he's got 4 or 5 players who start every week, but they start every week because they follow his instructions to the absolute letter. They do precisely what Ange Postecoglou is asking them to do. Dyson Maeda is one of those players. So when you're up against him, he can't really afford to come on and just be okay.
No, I think 4 or 5. I think it might be a bit more than that now. We've got a lot of...
Okay, nitpicker.
We might. Well, it's just because they're so good and they do what he wants so clearly. But I think you're right. I think it is difficult, but at the same time, if Maeda's out for
first of all, before we slate the guy, I think it was only right to terrific goal at Parkhead.
Oh yeah, amazing.
Absolute screamer. One of those ones you just love to watch flying, because you know as soon as it leaves his foot, it's going in as an absolute class goal. And I think he's capable of that. I don't know, I just get that feeling with him that he's going to be an important player for Celtic, but I just don't know if it'll be this season. It's been a bit stop-start for him. He's been good in November, then a wee stop-start thing, and it's just no coming off for him right now. But great goal, sort of looked to deserve his place, but he got his place because one, Maeda was injured, got injured in the goal, but also Abada and Maeda started the Hearts game. Didn't last very long when Maeda went off and Jota came on, but Abada was really poor in that Hearts game. Really poor. Celtic created a lot of chances and a lot of opportunities for him to score or assist, and he didn't take them. So Haksabanovic came in, and if Maeda's out for any length of time, I'd rather see Haksabanovic get a run at it, but I think Maeda will be back, and I don't think he's got any real issues if he loses his place. I think it was an opportunity for him, but I just think it just didn't look sharp enough. We always know about Ange, we never stop. If the ball's over the other side, you're still involved. I just don't think he had the sharpness to be involved all the time he wanted. He made some wrong decisions in the game, and it didn't go for him. He gets subbed, and you thought, that was an opportunity for you, but it's a cup game against a tough team at a tough venue, and it wasn't all there for him. I thought Jota did well on the right, but I think we were just lacking on the other side a wee bit, but I still think he's not going to get a run of games, but Abada, Turnbull, Ralston, Bernabe need a run of games, but with this team you just can't get it because the guys that are playing ahead of you are just doing so well.
Abada's an enormously frustrating player.
Yeah, he certainly. I find it very difficult to talk about Abada because, quite rightly so, people defend him quite a lot, right? Because he's a sort of reasonably young player, and he puts up just quite frankly ridiculous numbers. His goals return for his position on the pitch is undeniable at this point. But then a lot of those goals recently have been off the bench. A lot of them have been as an impact sub, which he's very, very good at. Did I say sug there? It came out of my head and I wasn't sure. An impact substitute. It came on as an impact sug and was completely different to how he starts. I feel like there's a pattern emerging with players, and Melly, you've already teed this up earlier on. It's players come in, they can make an impact, but it's very, very difficult to get into this team because of how well it's playing. And we are in the big cliche, the business end of the season. It's quite hard to dislodge players from their positions if they're playing well. Abada has done nothing in that game anyway to justify any more starts anytime soon, because he's just simply wasn't very good. His decision making isn't great.
See, from a purely selfish Celtic point of view, you're probably better just bringing him off the bench.
Yeah,
because he's probably going to weigh in with a goal or something, or a game, or when the full-backs are tired, it causes a bit of a problem with them. There's really no benefit to starting Abada.
I realise I may be springing this, and that's rule number one: don't spring stuff.
Okay, here we go.
I'm sure he made some sort of comment about how he hasn't been starting recently, and there's more to it than he's willing to talk about just now. He made some sort of comment that it wasn't really anything past that, but it was a little bit sort of cryptic. Now that could mean one of two things in my opinion. One, that this stuff about how he's not been getting picked because he's refusing to sign a new contract could be true, or there's something else. There's something else behind the scenes in maybe his personal life or whatever. But that I can only go on, kind of off the back of what he said.
We all need to start following that Fabrizio Romano to get these.
Marano.
Fabrizio Marano. He'll keep us up to date with everything. There was a tweet that went through. That sort of went viral today before we sat down to record this, and it was a snippet from a newspaper talking about the lack of young players in the league, Scottish players under 21, and how they're not coming through. And it's something that we've kind of spoken about, generally looking across the league, the level of player. There's no one really, you look at this league and go, there's no David Turnbull of a few years ago, that player from Motherwell. And is that because they're getting picked up at younger and younger ages by English clubs?
Yeah.
There is a bit of that. I don't watch an awful lot of English football. I certainly know almost nothing about the English Reserve League, but I am told that there's, within the clubs down there's a lot of Scottish young guys, 16, 17, 18, 19-year-olds in the Scottish system, in the English system, that are getting picked up before they break through. We've had it happen to ourselves. We've lost Ben Doak, but I feel like there's maybe one or two others.
There's a couple to Man City and Bayern Munich in recent years as well.
That we've lost. So we're just not really getting the chance, are we, to bring these players through? And of course, there's that homegrown rule. What is it? We need 8 homegrown players or something.
Yeah, for the Champions League.
For the Champions League.
Yeah, and I'm completely against that. To be honest, I know controversial.
Stephen's pet peeves.
Yeah, I just think it's completely unfair. I think it should be tiered, because the idea that a club like Celtic in Scotland, in the size of country that we are, with the record of producing young players that Scotland has, shouldn't be expected to compete with countries like Spain, Germany, Italy, England and all that. I don't know why we have to produce the same number of homegrown players and be expected to compete in the Champions League against countries that have got a far better record of producing young players. It's probably a conversation for another day, but I think it's
from a pure numbers perspective. When you're dealing with England, it's almost literally 10 times the population that we have to produce the same number of players.
Far more registered footballers as well. Far more. These countries have got proven track records of producing younger players, in Scotland don't in a generation really. So I think it's desperately unfair for Scotland to be lumped into the same bracket. If you have to have it, I would have it tiered. If we could have 3 and England could have 8, then I'd be all for that.
I think Celtic are really going to struggle. I know you in particular, Jamie, have said, how do you keep these players happy? And I think you blasphemy at the weekend. Somebody informed me that he said Celtic might move on from Anthony Ralston, but while that is discreet,
it was actually Stephen who said that. But I agree with Stephen, right? I'm not going to back. I fully agree with Stephen.
I resign. So
finally,
but I think it is something Celtic are going to struggle with next season. If James Forrest goes, then Celtic are down to Ralston, McGregor and Welsh pretty much, and players
Mikey Johnson.
Oh, bring him back, guy. He'll replace James Forrest, but you're really struggling. We've got Turnbull, we've got McCarthy counts. Is he going to be there? Taylor. So Celtic are really on the have 8 and that's it. So we're really going to start struggling, and I think Scottish football, it has produced a lot of players recently. We've seen Calvin Ramsey, Lewis Ferguson, Josh Doig all get big moves, but when they go, there's nothing else there, is there? You're looking
Does it reflect badly on the league that a lot of these players? No, it does reflect badly on, but does it reflect badly on the league that, say Chelsea, Man City, Liverpool, they take the best young talent and there's just no conversation about bringing them up here for a couple of years to get games. They would rather they played reserve football down south than full-time professional football in Scotland.
Yeah, I think it's been a problem for a while because you look at the facilities in Scotland and it is absolutely terrible.
I mean, would you send your prized teenager up to Livingston to be marshalled under Baby Martindale or whatever?
It's not even sending them to Livingston, it's sending them to Hearts, Celtic, Rangers, and they have to go to Livingston, they have to go to Kilmarnock and play on these pitches, but it's the facilities as well. And I keep going on about it, but Scottish football is slowly killing itself here because they don't want people through the doors, they want people to be in one stand and get no allocations. Okay, so you don't want to sell tickets, so how else do you bring in money? You sell players. Half of the clubs in this top league don't have youth facilities or youth development. They don't bring through their own players. So you're never going to make any money. You don't sell players. You don't sell out your stadium. Your TV revenue's poor. Where are you going to generate money from and put it back in? We've seen it. Aberdeen have brought in a lot of money recently. Spent it terribly, mind you. Yeah. But the money they brought in for Lewis Ferguson and Calvin Ramsey is outstanding. Hibs have done it in the past, but Hamilton are still talking about selling 2 players nearly 15 years ago or something, thinking they're a benchmark for Scottish football. Scottish football should be bringing through its own players and selling them. And while people can look at this and go, well, Celtic aren't doing that. Yes, but a lot of Celtic's players are getting snapped up so early. Ben Doak played last season at 16 years old, didn't he? So Celtic gave him a chance. It didn't stop him going.
Is there a middle ground though? Because you can say, okay, Ben Doak went down and he starts for Liverpool, right? But under normal circumstances, Celtic probably wouldn't be signing for players that would play for Liverpool anyway. But it's like there's Ben Doak and nobody. Like surely there's like a tier. Surely there's guys that are just a wee bit not as good as Ben Doak, or guys that, because so you take Ben Doak, you take James Forrest. You could probably argue that all things going, they followed the same path. Ben Doak will be a much better player than James Forrest. So logically, does it not stand that there's maybe a James Forrest in the Celtic reserve somewhere, or a Greg Taylor?
Rocco Vata's very highly thought of, and he has made his debut for Celtic. But
he's been linked away as well. It's been linked away.
I don't. Does that count because he's Irish? He wasn't included in that. Maybe is it not just Scottish players? But he is a player coming through. I think Matthew Anderson's good. There's a few good players there, but I think as well this B team playing in the Lowland League, while it gets these guys fixtures to play, I don't know if it's necessarily brilliant for the development, but what else have we got here? If you're going to be successful, Scottish clubs will always, the 7th place team will buy the best, will get the 9th best teams player, or the 9th team in the league will buy the guys that leave the 6th best team, and they'll just work it that way. 1-2 year contracts to these Midland guys. You always see, oh, there's Graham Shinney back at Aberdeen. Who'd have seen that coming? Bring players through, man. Invest in the youth.
I think we can't certainly sit on a Celtic podcast as we are experts at podcasting, but we're not experts at sorting out Scottish football.
Stay in your lane.
We're not experts at Scottish football's woes. But as I cast my eye across this league, I just see total, out with Celtic, right? A total dearth of talent. A dearth of managerial talent. It's the same names that crop up all the time, the same guys.
Stephen Robinson linked with the Aberdeen job. Is this not Jim Goodwin, Mark too?
It's all that sort. It's players who are League 1 or 2 journeymen, players who are not good enough for England League 1 or 2, or players that are Scottish that have done the rounds, coming at the end of the career, and they just want a couple of seasons closer to home. That kind of makes up the majority of the player pool for me in Scottish football.
Yeah, I think you've asked this before, Jamie, but put Ange Postecoglou in Hearts, Hibs or Aberdeen, does he get much closer to Celtic and Rangers than those 3 clubs right now?
Absolutely.
100%, doesn't he? Because he's got a plan, he's got a way of playing, and he'll go out and do that. The rest of the teams don't. They don't have a plan. It's all short term. It's, if I bring in players, solidify, I'll maybe not get the sack for a few months. It's not the way to go.
It is. There's not much that Celtic can certainly do about it.
No, and it doesn't have to be permanent, these things. See when you talk about the standard of Scottish football, it might just be that it's a particularly poor season for it. It doesn't have to be permanent. It just feels a little bit bleak at the moment because it feels like a long time since we've had even like a crop of players come through at a particular team. Because if you've seen it, Hibs is going back quite a long time now. You're going back to the likes of Scott Brown and Kevin Thompson, and then maybe Derek Riordan and all that. But then Dundee United a few years ago looked as if they brought through quite a few decent players. They had a
good young manager.
Yeah, they had Armstrong, Mackay-Steven, Robertson and all that. Gold at one point. Jeff J. But it feels like a long time since we've had one of these sort of emerging crops of players, but that will be directly related to the fact that we can't keep them in the country, that it all just kind of loops around. So I don't know what the answer to this is.
Is the answer maybe, as ridiculous as this sounds, is the answer maybe FIFA coming in with some sort of rule that protects the smaller nations? If they're going to say we need X amount of players, at clubs that were grown in that nation, but it's never been easier for other nations to poach other people's players,
I suppose you wouldn't be able to stop that. There would be employment laws, I assume, against things like that.
But football, the football contract itself is completely against employment law.
Yeah, that's true. I suppose the only way around that would be to give greater compensation to clubs. It doesn't stop the problem, but it probably generates a little bit more revenue. So hopefully they could do something like that. But the problem with Celtic producing players is that we can only do so much, because the last two. Well, Ben Doak looks as if he's going to become like a generational talent, right? It's too late for that. He's gone, and he's, by all accounts, doing quite well at Liverpool, very well at Liverpool at a very early age. He already was in the first team setup. You go back to Kieran Tierney, he was in at a very early age. So the guys, this is why I don't really see the B team making too much of a difference, because see the guys at 17, 18, they will be involved. See if you've got a proper diamond in a rough talent there, you will identify him. Not only will you identify him, everyone else will as well. Man City will identify him, Arsenal, they'll all spot this guy at 15, 16, 17. So then it becomes even more difficult with the sort of advent of more technological scouting and all that, sort of virtual scouting and all that. It's just made Celtic's position an awful lot more difficult.
How many games in the league left, Melly?
10.
10 games to go. And the league is hotting up. We have got by the time you read this or listen to it, read it. One thing they'll not be doing is reading it. They'll be certainly watching it, they'll be listening to it. The semi-final draw will have been made.
Yes.
I think we might get Rangers in that one for some reason.
Would you rather them in the final or the semi?
I think, to quote Gary, who was on the Reaction podcast, put it beautifully, you don't want Rangers anywhere near a final.
Nah.
So you want them in the semi-final. So that's it. It's goodbye from Stephen, goodbye from Melly, goodbye from me, goodbye for this dog that was down here the whole time. It was here the whole time. Look how ugly it is. Look at that wee dog. It was here the whole time. Let us know if you spotted it. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for listening. Thanks to everyone who supports us on Patreon, and we'll see you next week. Woof woof.